Welcome to Lighten Up, the Art of Living Clutter-Free, a podcast for people who are ready to clear the physical, the mental, and the emotional clutter that's been weighing them down. I'm Melanie Cohen, your host, coach, and guide. Each week, we talk about the clutter you can see and the clutter you can't. The stuff in your home, the noise in your head, the expectations, habits, and unmade decisions that quietly drain your energy. This isn't about perfection or minimalism. It's about creating space for what actually matters in this season of your life. Let's lighten up together, starting now. Welcome back to another episode of Lighten Up, the Art of Living Clutter-Free, the podcast where we talk about all things clutter. And today is one of those special days where I have a guest with me. I have Amy Pierre Russo, who is a work-life harmony coach. She has a background in HR and leadership coaching. She's built a work-life harmony coaching practice that helps moms disrupt the hustle cycle and replace it with intentional harmony. She does this through one-on-one coaching and the Harmonious Moms community, a space designed to help mothers pursue their goals without taking a backseat to everyone else's needs. Overall, her work focuses on helping women create space for what matters most: quality time with family, tending to their own mental and physical well-being, and nurturing their ambitions so they can build the legacy they're worthy of. She believes moms don't need to be told to do more. They need space, resources, and support to intentionally leverage what they're already doing more fully. Welcome, Amy. I'm so happy you're here today.
Thank you so much, Melanie, for having me and also for just the space you've created. Your podcast is such a cozy, warm, worthwhile listen.
I knew that I needed to have you on the podcast, and for a host of reasons. I think there's a lot of mental clutter associated with being a working mom, especially an entrepreneur. I also think that there's a lot of mental clutter associated with expectations outside of the workplace, just, motherhood in general. And kids create physical clutter, which creates mental clutter. So there were a lot of different reasons I wanted to have you here today. So let's just start with how this all began for you.
Yeah, absolutely. And when you're talking about all of the clutter, it's like, it really lands that, yes, there's a lot going on in all the parts of our life, both physically and mentally. So again, I appreciate the platform you create. But for me, it began, honestly, my background is in HR. So I was used to being in this position of wanting to help, but also specifically create systems for help. So create systems for benefits management, wellness programs, like just enhance the employee experience. And the ways that I saw this gap kind of not be able to be filled was when people had so many responsibilities they were carrying outside of work. And I actually see that as enhancements in a lot of ways. You're gaining all of these experiences, skill sets, different things that you're able to manage simultaneously, like all of these incredible things. Yet in work, it's almost like you could see people kind of having to take a back seat, not be as engaged. And unfortunately, sometimes other people be promoted over them, those kinds of things too. So it was interesting that in my experience, when I shifted from HR into coaching, I was actually doing a lot of leadership coaching and coaching small business owners so that they could not be so caught up in the weeds of the day-to-day, the details of their business, but look at things more high level. And I noticed a lot of similarities with the experience people were creating when you were doing the intro of the show and talking about just kind of these demands, like external norms, things being thrown on us. I don't think we realize how much of that there is, both in our work and then being a mom adds this whole new layer to it. So finding enough space to create our path of what we want for ourselves first so that we can even, begin to explore making it happen.
Okay. So many thoughts. So many thoughts. My husband has been in HR for like 25 years. I think he's one of the good guys
Yeah.
because he was one of the guys that was like 50-50, down the middle when it comes to who's responsible for drop off and pickup, who's responsible
Mm,
for, cleanup and homework. I mean,
yeah.
we had different responsibilities in the kitchen. I cooked, he cleaned because we don't want to eat his what he has to make. And I talk a lot about like maybe he's this way because he was raised by a single mom, because I am definitely from a generation where women and men were still in very specific gender roles.
Mm,
And I think we're growing out of it. I'm still very frustrated every time there is a reference to dad babysitting as opposed to dad taking care of the kids. And there's still all of these expectations around gender roles. So, how does this come up for you in your work?
yeah. I think that that's so well stated to be observant of the support systems you have in your life, recognizing that some of them are within your existing relationships and that some you may have to get kind of crafty and creative to fill some gaps. So, and I think that this does come up that even if you have a partner who's, willing and capable and, available for certain things, recognizing that just you and your partner, that still may not close all of the gaps that exist. And so being really open-minded to thinking about like what are other ways? Can you do a
Mm.
carpool with other parents in the neighborhood? Can you create like a drop-off schedule with other parents for sports? Like where can you get creative to bring yourself back some expansiveness of time that doesn't exist naturally?
Right. And a lot of what you're talking about is also then community building, I think it's become so cliche, but it does take a village. We've been saying that for decades, but I think there was a lot of lip service to it for a very long time. And I just look forward to a time where it's not shocking that there's a stay-at-home dad. That, it's just that you could be one or the other, or you share, down the middle. But I think, women are still getting the short end of the stick when it comes to the expectations of what she's doing. And while being a stay-at-home mom was never an option for me, one, financially, it wasn't an option
Mm,
living here in New York. But I also don't think I would have been a great stay-at-home mom. I really
yeah,
don't think I would have been,
yeah,
for a host of reasons. But whether we're stay at home or we work, there's
yeah,
still this expectation. So of
yeah.
course we need to use words like harmonious. Like
Mm.
we need to lean into that because it doesn't always feel like it's that way.
Yeah, and that is a good point that sometimes you have to really take agency over what you want and creating it so much because I still have clients where even if the father is, more involved with the kids or you stay at home capacity, those kinds of things, I think there is this societal expectation of norms that makes it so even though the mom is, the breadwinner in the relationship, sometimes still taking on the weight of managing things, scheduling the doctor's appointments, logistically doing so much. You really have to be intentional about designing like, okay, even if our relationship is this way and we're okay with dad being the stay at home, like still going into the layers of what does that mean? How do you operate? Who's managing things? So we can dig into those mental weight and the mental capacity and try to really offload things in a reasonable, realistic way.
Right, right. I feel like I don't want to say divorced. Well, yeah, I'm a little divorced from having been,
Hmm.
a hands-on parent because my
Hmm.
kids are 29,
Yeah.
almost 30, and 27. But I remember I worked full time for a lingerie manufacturer, traveled regularly on
Yeah.
business. And, my story, people who have been listening know, but I lost 65 pounds. I was recruited to work for Weight Watchers. And when I started, I worked part time. This was like, you don't get hired full time. You had to like pay your dues.
Yeah.
And so I was doing both like my full time travel job and that at the
Yeah.
same time. And I finally let go of the full time job and I was picking my daughter up from kindergarten. She's almost 30. So everyone knows this is like almost 25 years ago. And I picked her up and all the moms were like, "What are you doing here today? Did you take the day off from work?" And I was like, "No, you know what? I have a change in my schedule. I left Vanity Fair. I'm working part-time. So I'll be able to pick Jolie up some days of the week." And I kid you not, there were a half a dozen moms standing around me saying, "What a wonderful thing you've done for Jolie," my older daughter. And I
Mhm.
was like, "I didn't do this for Jolie. I
Mm,
did this for me." I
mm,
enjoyed what I had been doing, but I was ready for something different. I was ready to help women or people change their lives and have
yeah.
better relationships with nutrition and their bodies and all the things. But they could not stop making reference to the fact that I was doing this for my daughters, which to me made me feel even more guilty than I had been
Mm,
feeling when I wasn't at every birthday party and I wasn't
yeah.
at all the after school things. And so I would like to think that's better now, but I think there's also a lot of stay-at-home moms who are very quick to judge those who
Mm.
choose to work for whatever reason. What's your take on that?
I appreciate you sharing that story because that it's still the case that we have to be I don't wanna keep saying the word, but, like, intentional about the people we choose to be around, the communities that we're a part of,
Mhm.
and I think that there is this thing, like, we hear all of these things, burnout is so high, and because people are burnt out, they tend to isolate, and it's this kind of, like, vicious cycle, but it's true, if you're in these communities where you feel judged, shamed, misunderstood, of course you're gonna pull back. You're not gonna wanna engage in those places. And so you do almost need to do more work, I think, than people realize on the front end to find these places and people who are actually like your right fit, not saying that's completely comfortable all of the time. Challenged in the, in the right ways and new perspective, fresh ideas, but can understand the ways that what you value are also valued, like showing your dog that you're working, that you're excited about what you and you have these skills to contribute to society, like all of these beautiful, wonderful attributes, and that it's not just assumed that, it's the wrong thing to do. You have to work and that's like shameful in some way.
Right. I appreciate you saying that because I feel like so much of my life was about providing a good example for my
Mm,
kids,
mm,
whether it was doing work that you're meant to do in the world,
mhm,
or there was a period of time where I was prioritizing my exercise in a way that looked
mhm,
like it was inconvenient for my kids, but
mm,
no one really said that. They were just like, "Whoa."
mm,
And just for context, where I was working out was in Manhattan. We live in
mhm,
Brooklyn,
mm,
and the classes started at a time of day where my husband wouldn't be home from work
mhm,
early enough for me to head out, and I would pick the kids up after school,
mhm,
and we would get on the train,
mhm,
and they would do homework or read or something on the train, and
mhm,
then we met, like, at a halfway point
mhm,
where we stopped on a platform, my husband would take them and do the same back home, and I
mhm.
would continue on into the city to be able to work out, and I just kept saying that that was my way of showing them to prioritize health and wellness, not just in mommy makes us eat a lot of vegetables because she works for Weight Watchers, which is not why, but that I was showing them the priority of
Mm,
physical activity
mm,
and the priority for yourself, not just for your body. I just was happier after. I'm still,
yeah,
so much happier after I work
yeah,
out. And so I think that that needs to play, a part in all of this also. So you're absolutely right, on that one. 100%. So talk to me what it's like for your clients to work with you. What are they getting out of it? How do you work with them? Tell us a little bit about that.
yeah. it's cracking open these pieces of life that we're talking about. And a lot of what you said too, like, I very much think it's our responsibility to manage our emotional, our physical, our mental well-being. And so when you tell a story like that and set up this example, not just like going with what's easy or what's convenient, but like actually designing a set of things that works for you based on your priorities and letting that be an example to everyone who's what your team, your family, your kids, people who are watching you. And so it's doing that, creating a plan for yourself based on your values, based on your strengths, where you do more of living into your ideal. And so over time, we're really able to figure out, like, where are you just kind of like going with the flow, going with what you think you should be doing. That's a big thing that comes up is like, you're just going along in your work in certain patterns that you've adopted. And it's like, well, why is that the case? And so we really start to peel, like you just are following these habits and we have the ability to construct something new. So envisioning what that is, and then also a level of it is community. I have the Harmonious Moms community for everyone, including my one-on-one clients who want it. They have access to these workshops, expert guest speakers, to be online in a kind of like offline space, this personal app where you can ask questions and be a part of this space to get information and connection with people who understand similar experiences. So going back to that example, you can be around other people and be in communities that are the wrong people for you. And so we really treat that as sacred in the community, that when you're aligned, when people are ambitious and driven and working towards similar aspirations to you, we really want to protect those relationships and nurture more of that. So it's really important to just like prioritize what you want to create and put the conditions in place to make it happen.
Sure, sure. I think I was making an assumption that the people that you're working with are working moms. Do you also work with moms who are looking for more harmony that don't work?
Yeah, I don't tend to have a lot of clients who aren't working. Sometimes people looking for something new. So maybe they're like figuring out what the next venture is or how they're going to step into something, even if it's like starting a small business or something like that. But yes, a lot of my clients are moms working, not working, and honestly, parents more broadly. Sometimes it is a parent, or someone with a busy schedule who my whole thing is that we're really taking things that you hear. Like, I think there's a lot of advice thrown out there on how to be efficient, how to optimize time, but sometimes it doesn't copy paste into your life. Especially if you're a mom. So really thinking about how to, have that success, whatever that looks like for you, in a way that actually works for your life.
Right. Okay, so you used the word advice, and I'm going to say, I think there's a lot of advice clutter out there. Like the people who are so eager to give you advice without really knowing who you are, what you do, or any of the other things that are connected to being able to. I mean, like sometimes you're not even, I think most of the time, we're not even asking for that advice.
Yeah.
So if someone starts a sentence with, well, that like, I have advice if you're willing to take it. I think I probably say that too. But, one of the things that I say about like coaches like us, the best coaches don't give advice. They just ask enough questions until the client has figured it out for themselves. But if a client asks me for advice, I would say, these are some of the options. This is what has worked for me. That doesn't mean it's going to work for you for what it's worth, but at least I can give you some suggestions. Now let's talk it through and see which one makes the most sense. But yeah, I just think of every time I had a child in a shopping cart at the supermarket and people who I didn't even know wanted to tell me what I should be doing differently. Like, I'll take that under advisement. What I learned to say is, oh my God, that's really great advice, even if I was going to do the opposite.
Yeah.
So I think this allows us to like kind of talk about clutter from, a mental and emotional standpoint, because being a parent, not just being a mom, there's a whole lot of clutter in, the parenting world. So let's talk first about the physical. Can we talk about the physical clutter that a
Yeah.
baby or a child creates? How do you look at that?
Yeah. I think applying what works in one part of your life to different places. And so
Uh-huh.
sometimes, especially parents as your kids get older, because I work with parents, who have kids across the board, like all sorts of ages. And so looking at their capability. And as they're getting older, hey, it was one way. I used to put away everything maybe. And as they're getting a little bit older, what are those systems that you can set up to create more structure where like, can they drop it into a toy bin themselves? What are those little tweaks that you can make? And I think that copy paste to a whole bunch of different places in our lives.
Sure. Yeah, I just think that my kids didn't need as many things as they have. We overshopped and produced for them, and, they had very generous grandparents and aunts and uncles and stuff like that. But the less stuff there is, the easier it is to keep clean. And I don't mean that if I had it to do over again, which I don't, but if I had to do it over again, I would never suggest minimalism for my children. Like, to me, it's not that the opposite is true, but rather where is that medium where the space that you're creating is fun and useful and doesn't look like a pigsty all the time, which it felt like for a long period of time. And I think, there's a lot of, doesn't matter what social media you're on, whether you're reading on Substack or you're watching TikTok
Yeah.
videos, that there are moms out there that want to help teach other moms how to organize their kids' stuff. And I see the validity in that. But one of the things that I say all the time is I'm not an organizer because I'm not the greatest at it. Like, I
Yeah.
am a clutter coach. We address the clutter and we
Yeah.
address the physical and the mental and the calendar and the digital and all those
Yeah.
things. And I just feel really strongly that if we're looking over and over and over again for the right organizational tools, that maybe we still have too much stuff. Not that organizers aren't important and valuable. I
Yeah.
feel like, I couple with them really well.
Yeah.
But I do think that, so the research shows that women are like 60% more likely, 70% more likely to suffer from increased stress cortisol levels based on, the clutter around them. And stuff is visual noise. So if there are toys all over the place, that's noise. We hear it in our heads. It stresses us out. It makes us less capable of other things, or it leaves some of us yelling and screaming when we didn't want to be yelling and screaming. Pick up your
Yeah.
damn toys. And so there wouldn't have been as many to pick up. It wouldn't have been as overwhelming to them.
Yeah.
So I'm a firm believer in our children probably have more than they need. And again, I'm not asking everyone to go to the flip side.
But yeah, but what I'm hearing, it comes down to, are you asking the right question? Because I do think a lot of us have either or thinking in a lot of
Right.
places in our lives. And so it comes back to that idea, like, are things aligned to your priorities in life?
Right.
Nowadays, there's so many shifts that people are making where rather than letting, the family members get this like junk and clutter that you don't need and you don't really want, saying, hey, we're going to do this fund. And like, if you're thinking of getting something, like, let's do this instead, or even contribute to an experience. Hey, we're signing them up in, this thing over the fall. If you'd like to contribute for their birthday, like do that instead, pointing people where you want them to go.
I love that because I've gotten to the point where my kids know that I want theater tickets for my
There you
birthday,
go. Yeah.
Mother's Day, Hanukkah, whatever. And if I want a thing, I want them
Yeah.
to know exactly what that thing is.
Yeah.
Now, I will tell you it's because one of my kids is like, just tell me what you want, Mom, just tell
Yeah.
me what you want. But also, we don't have to worry about something coming into the house where I'm like, what am I going to do with this thing?
Right.
It out every time they come visit, so they think I use it all the time. Like, that doesn't seem very real, if you will.
Yeah.
So I do love the idea of, a trip to the museum, a trip to the park,
Yeah.
eating out in a special place as a replacement to more things.
Yeah. Absolutely.
But I also appreciate that there are more opportunities for things in different ways, because I'm huge on sustainability. So
Yeah.
going to the library or going to all the little libraries, the little free libraries in the neighborhood, an opportunity to not have to buy every book known to man. And I still support the small bookstores, privately owned. But I have seen in some of those free libraries things like puzzles and games. And I know in my neighborhood or, in the parents' Facebook group that they do like a toy swap right before the holidays. Like, why am I buying my kid all new toys when someone used it for a year, it's still in great condition? My kid doesn't care whether it came in a box or not, like to be able to take advantage of those kind of things. Okay, but I really want to talk about different forms of clutter. Parents. And one of them is the calendar. There's a lot of calendar clutter. One, I think in many cases, people are overscheduling their kids and have them in too many different things. And I think some of it is just like navigating their schedule, my spouse's schedule, if I have a spouse, my parents' schedule, if the grandparents are, helping with raising the kids or whatever. So let's talk about that calendar.
Yeah, absolutely. I bet you'll have a lot of good things to say on this too, so I can't wait. But I think a lot of people I work with tend to do things like to solve them. So it's a little bit more reactive. And I work with people to get into a place where things are a little bit, things are more on the proactive side. So rather than doing something that creates breathing space or room or even reflection time, on the back end, we think about how can we be structuring things. So a example I sometimes use is like, if you created all of this like help and systems and like all of this like freedom for a week that you had to be away for an event, a business event, or you were saying like in your old jobs, you were traveling a ton. And it's like, well, how can you bring in pieces of what worked so well to help you to be away, even in your regular schedule, in your normal routines? So rather than setting up grocery delivery because you're away, just having that be this consistent buffer in your life. And so looking at the calendar that way to create some more space, breathing room, not scheduling ourselves back to back to back, always like leaning towards hustle mode, and also reflecting. That is the thing that like kind of where people trip up on their own feet a little is, not putting in the calendar when you need to look at the budget or plan the quarter ahead, or even personally schedule the kids' doctor's appointments, schedule your appointments, like those things, put it in the calendar. If you don't own that time, somebody's going to, schedule it for you, unfortunately.
Right. I love all this. I mean, I think one, when we do talk about the fact that I traveled on business, my younger daughter was like, but who took care of us? It's like, your father did. But what do you mean? I was like, he did homework with you. Well, I mean, she didn't have homework at the time. I left that job when my younger one was 4. Yeah, but who cooked for us? Dad did.
Unfathomable.
Like, yeah, you probably had pasta and eggs every night for dinner when I was gone. Unless, of course, he was doing takeout and I didn't know about it, which was also a possibility. But it was unfathomable to her.
Yeah.
That's the way things had been. It wasn't in her memory.
Yeah.
But I do think, less is more in so many different places in our life, and being able to navigate that calendar with less in it, can be really helpful. But, there are kids who are taking the violin and ballet and in softball and doing all of the things. And I mean, our kids got to do all the things that were fun to them. It's not like we kept them, away from all of that. There were just some limitations there. And I think the other thing about the calendar is it ends up getting filled up with everybody else's stuff and not ours.
Yeah.
It does have the doctor's appointments on there, but it has theirs, but we've forgotten to schedule our own doctor's appointments, or we postpone them, for a long period of time.
Yeah.
Like we were talking about working out before, so often as parents, if things get busy, that's one of the first things to go from the list. And mom would be, would benefit greatly for doing things like journaling, meditation. I don't mean to imply that any one of those is something that every mom should do, but they need some kind of grounding activity in their
Yeah.
day. But that's not going on the calendar
Right.
because in a very reactive way, like you said,
Yeah.
doing all the things that feel really urgent.
Mm.
When what would happen if the meditation was what was urgent, or that the
Yeah.
journaling is what was urgent, like
Yeah.
just staring off into space? What if that had some urgency to it, right?
Yeah, some prioritization. Like, really, it's funny you saying these things because the restorative time, the restorative activities, valuing those, like research now shows that even just knowing what we're going to do when we get the 5 minutes, when we get the 15 minutes, it makes it so much more valuable because rather than using the time scrolling or maybe like responding to email, something that feels like, okay, this is like pseudo productive, you're actually able to know, okay, when I have 15 minutes of my day today, I'm going to sit down and journal. After I'm going to do 10 minutes of that. I'm going to do a quick breathing reset. Like that's what really is beneficial for me. And I think, unfortunately, the starting place that a lot of us are coming from this with is that we don't even know what it is. So we have to build in time to experiment. Maybe this week I'm going to like see how this feels, what worked, what didn't, and then play with it over time before you find what works for you.
Right, right. Yeah, that's really good. So, one of the things about the calendar is work. And another thing about the calendar is the kids, spouse, fitting
Mhm.
friends in or anything. But the other part of the calendar is parents. And I think that more and more often, women are not just caring for their kids, but are
Yeah.
also caring for aging parents. I mean,
Yep.
certainly it depends on age, but I feel like so many moms are having children later because they
Yeah.
are prioritizing career, or
Yep.
they haven't found the one. I found the one at 18. So getting married at 25 and having my first kid at 26 to us didn't feel really early because we'd already been together,
Yeah.
for over 5 years. And so I didn't have to start worrying about aging parents until much later.
Yeah.
And so I don't necessarily have to worry about aging parents and kids
Yeah.
as much.
Right.
Tell me about working with your clients who really are feeling like in the middle of
Yeah.
everything, work, family,
Yeah.
etc.
Yeah, the sandwich generation is a very real thing and stressful, but a lot of what we were talking about before, looking at community, looking at support, I think sometimes we forget what support can look like. And for a lot of my clients, I also realize that they default what support looks like. And so they're thinking like, oh, I always delegate. And like if at work, I have a team and I'll delegate this to someone on my team. But with the caretaker situation, you can't go to your default necessarily. And so you may need to get creative and think about like, what does this look like? What's realistic? What's feasible? And so one thing I like to think about is, again, not having either or thinking. And there are so many like little like things that people didn't think of before, like a client who had a brother who came into town for a week at the holidays, but it's like they have their life, their family, they're managing. You are just in this caretaker role, taking on the predominant weight of taking care of your parents. It's not that he didn't want to be more involved, never really like shared or thought through an option or asked or and those kinds of things. And so a lot of time, the person on the outskirts also doesn't want to over inject themselves into what's become the norm and those kinds of things. But it was so funny just adding a week of his trip to a time that he's already going to be in town. And like now you can take them to 3 different appointments. You can, alleviate so much stress from me having to scatter things all over the place. And just like it's a small thing, but like what a huge weight that takes
Right,
off. So just
right,
being proactive and having these conversations and scheduling.
right, right. But you know what else this is making me think is
Mm,
like in parenting, I think
mm,
that there's an expectation that the daughter, if the
mm,
children are
mm.
multi-sex, multi-gendered, that like the daughters are going to be the ones to take care of the parents as opposed to the men. I mean, my husband is the one that's, responsible for his mom. He was an only
Yeah.
child by his mom. I mean, she had stepkids, but none of
Yeah.
them were stepping in and helping out.
Yeah.
And he's doing it from 6,000 miles away also. So there's a lot of like navigating time of day, him
Yep.
being zoomed in on doctor's appointments and
Yeah.
things like that. But I think in general, it's the women who are expected to, step in when it's time for a parent to have assistance for whatever it is, whether it's just taking them to doctor's appointments or assisting them in the house or, whatever it is. Okay.
That makes me think, like what you were saying is, if you are like whatever, physically, logistically, like organizationally, the person who makes sense, are there other ways? Like maybe financially, another sibling could like step in or do more, or like, are there other ways to look at things? And so just
Right.
thinking about things on different levels, that makes
Right.
sense.
Right. No, I appreciate that. I think that's good feedback. Okay. So
Hmm.
are you ready?
Yeah.
'Cause this is the podcast about clutter.
Yeah.
We all have some kind of clutter in our lives, whether it's
Yeah.
digital or calendar or emotional or mental or people. I like to say, when it came to parenting, that just because the kids liked each other, doesn't mean we're gonna like each other or be a good
Yeah.
fit. I've been blessed. I've been blessed. I have the right people. But social media does create a whole lot of clutter, 24-hour news cycle. This is a rough world we're living in right now. I don't care where
Yeah.
people stand politically, but at the end of the day, there's a lot of really heavy, hard, scary things going on right now. And that creates a whole lot of, I mean, like I've cut the news out almost like, uh, it's almost like by 90%, I think.
Yeah.
Because I am a healthier woman if I don't have the news on in the background all day long or watching it right before bed. Oh, please.
Yeah.
That was the stupidest thing I was doing for years. But anyway, so there are all these forms of clutter.
Yeah.
And then of course the physical clutter and
Yeah.
whatever. So where does clutter pop up for you in your life?
Clutter, I've noticed for me, pops up with uncertainty and with times of transition.
Mm,
So when something is like, you can't plan for it, or for example, in life right now, my son started at a new daycare. And so like just navigating the like, ooh, like this morning doesn't feel good. And like now that, how is that going to throw off your day, or those kinds of things? Those things you can't necessarily plan for throw me. So knowing, I have my tools in my toolkit, and knowing like these are the restorative things. Maybe some morning, if it's, terrible and there's lots of tears, like maybe leaning on some extra things in my toolkit, but staying up on what those things are that actually, ground me, allow me to refuel myself, even on the off days, that is really helpful.
that's good. That's good. I think that like recognizing that the tears are not just like, the terrible twos or something like that, but
Yeah.
rather they may actually be something behind it. And we
Yeah.
probably don't need to dig really deeply into it to figure
Yeah.
out where the tears are coming from,
Yeah.
especially when the tears are our own. When am I
Hmm.
going to get through this stage? I think is
Yeah.
something that a lot of people like crave,
Mm.
is to get out of a stage, and then you're like, "You know what? I would take we didn't have terrible twos in our
Mm.
house. They were three-nagers. Like, that was it
Yeah.
for us. That was the worst year, was the 3.
Yeah.
7? 7? No. I enjoy, as much as people like to make fun of the teen years, I really enjoyed the teen years because, like, they're getting smart and they're
Yeah.
teaching about
Independent.
things in these very educated ways, and we were having discussions about the ways of the world and,
Yeah.
political science and history and literature and all those things. All of a sudden, we're, like, super cool to talk about.
Yeah.
But with every age comes a different, struggle and challenge, and you know what? I grew up in the '70s and '80s. I have no idea how I would have survived social media and
Yeah.
technology, especially since I was suffering from ADHD and no one knew,
Yeah.
why can't she focus? What's wrong? Why can't she focus?
Right.
So I have a feeling that high school would have been really hard with the social media for a host of reasons. And even my kids were on like the beginnings of social media
Yeah.
when it came to when they were growing up, because even they now are like, we didn't have tablets and phones when
Yeah.
we were young. And I'm like, I know. And there are times where I wish I had it for you
Yeah.
in retrospect, but I also feel like I didn't have to learn how to navigate those kinds of things.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Right.
Yeah.
How do you navigate that? Especially your son is 2 or 3, I can't remember.
He's 2.5. Yeah. My little guy, I know. My little guy is 2.5, but it's true for the people, especially the people I work with who have older kids. I think that's all the more reason why you do have to think through what your ideal is, because when we're going back to thinking about that societal norms, societal expectations, it's true. Like what your grandparents, like what their grandparents are thinking of and telling you, and advice that you get solicited or not, it's going to be of a different time. And so as all of these things change, it's like, well, a newer thing that parents are doing is, again, when we're going back into thinking about community, is thinking about like for their friends, the people who and their parents who having some like across the board who are, hey, none of us are going to get them phones until X years old. And so now they're not saying everybody has a phone except for thinking about the ways that you can create what you're wanting. And so thinking through what that is, it's changing. But what you said also makes me think about the root cause of things. Like when we're thinking about why do we have our kids overscheduled and in all of these activities and things like that, it's like, yes, there's social media is what they would be doing otherwise. There's video games, thinking about like the mental health outcomes of, so much time on all of these things. And also about the lack of safety. Like nowadays, if kids being bullied at school, it doesn't stop at school. They come home and there's, fake accounts, online accounts where they're still being bullied. And so really thinking about all of these layers and what you're trying to solve for so that you can come up with something that supports your family members and their needs.
Yeah. Yeah. I think, it's like talking before about the moms being so shocked and what a wonderful thing I did for my daughter, and realizing that the bullying isn't just for kids.
Yeah.
Moms will bully other moms. And
Yeah.
I think that's like one of my takeaways from all of that. And how do you teach your kids to not bully
Mm.
if you are a bully yourself? You
Mm.
know? That can be super rough.
Yeah.
Okay, so what's something you would want to make sure that people took away from this conversation?
I think the biggest thing right now is that what you want for yourself is possible. It might just have to do with taking the time, the intentionality, and support to create it.
You make it sound so simple.
I think that's true. Like sometimes we are in environments where it's even validated to think like, okay, designing a life with some space, with less stuff, with less clutter. Like sometimes it just feels like we're in environments where that doesn't seem possible. And so knowing that it's possible, knowing that there are people doing this, hopefully just that alone helps you believe that it's true so you can work towards creating it for yourself.
Right, right. I love that. So all of your information is going to be in the show notes, but, loud and clear, how can people find you and how can they work with
Yeah.
you?
Yeah, absolutely. So my website is just coachingwamy.com. And there's information on my services. You can book a completely free discovery call with me to learn more about how my work might support you in your unique set of circumstances. But I'm most active on LinkedIn. It's just Amy Pierre Russo, and on Instagram, coachingw_Amy. I'll also make sure that your listeners have access to a free resource that's just 10 easy ways to come up with harmony in your life right now. Because again, just knowing like your default list of things to go to is really supportive.
Right, right. I'm so happy that you have that. Well, first of all, I'm glad that you're offering up that resource. I think we could all probably benefit from it in some way. I'm so happy I had you here today, Amy, because you are among the younger guests that I've had on the show.
Yeah.
Right? You're here to represent, which I appreciate because I think one of the things that happens in
Mm,
life is that younger people are not taken as seriously as older people
yeah.
because we've been around, we know we have all the experience. And at the end of the
Mm,
day, I remember hearing someone complaining, what can a millennial tell me? What can a millennial life coach offer me if they haven't even lived as long as I have? Like, but you know what? Maybe some people have figured it out earlier than whatever it is. I don't mean figured it all out, but what if that person figured it out faster than we did? Like I'm here to listen to it. And in my first like significant management job,
mm,
I was 27 and the people who were working for me,
yeah.
47, 57, 67, and I had to
Yeah.
fight for their trust.
Right.
And as a result, I am so eager to listen to younger people. I talk about this with my own daughters.
Mm,
There are things in life that they knew so much more about than I do. I'm going to learn from them.
yeah.
Like I shouldn't make any false assumptions. My younger daughter knows more about history and politics than I ever will.
Mm,
And I love that about her. I think there's a
yeah.
point in time in your kids' lives where you're like, I think they're smarter than I am.
Mm,
And I say that in a funny way, and really I don't mean that they're smarter, but rather they have a wealth of knowledge that I can learn from. So this was a sidetracked way of saying that of course I want younger moms on talking about what's happening when kids are younger. And if for
yeah.
no other reason, you deserve it. You deserve this space, for that. But I'd also like to communicate to all of my listeners who are grandmothers or soon to be grandmothers or aunts or godparents or
Yeah.
somebody else to hear moms need your help and they need your
Mm,
support. And help and support doesn't mean advice. That's actually, rolling the sleeves up and saying, how can I help you? I think that's it. That's the problem with advice is that the assumption is that what we're thinking is what the other person needs, as opposed to
right.
saying, all right, what do you need from me?
Yeah.
And then that person's needs are satisfied. And don't we all want to help other people? It just makes us feel good as
Yeah.
long as the helping them is not at the expense of ourselves.
You're such a epitome of an example though, because here you are with this abundance of experience and like such cool industries that you've worked for and like so much. Like I learn from you every time I hear you speak. And so but for you to then create this platform where you're genuinely curious and like, sharing other people's stories and their zone of genius. I just think that, yeah, we could all do more of that. Perfect sense when you're saying like your kids are smarter than you in ways because they go deep in some areas that you have no interest in going deep on.
There's that too.
And so we learn from
There's
each other, which
that.
is incredible.
I love it. And I used to hear a lot, good kids come from good parents.
Mm,
Some of us do it despite the parenting that we
yeah.
had. They are not who they are because of me. I just assisted in the development.
Mm,
I
yeah.
was here to back them up. They are their own women for sure. Amy, thank you again for being here. I'm so happy we did this, and maybe we'll have you back when he's 16 or something. I
Oh
don't know.
my.
We'll have him back before that.
Incredible. Thank you so much, Melanie, for having me. I truly appreciate it.
My pleasure. My pleasure. Thank you for listening to Lighten Up the Art of Living Clutter-Free. If this episode resonated, please subscribe, leave a review, and share it with someone who could use just a little bit of lightness. If you're ready for deeper support, you can work with me one-on-one or join my Lighten Up Clutter-Free Mindset Group program. You can find all the details at my website, thoughtfullycoaching.com. Until next time, progress over perfection. Messy action is better than no action at all. So let's lighten up.